All right, let's talk about the Detroit Lions. Of course, now that the draft and undrafted free agent cycle is completely behind us, we've gone through a phase of rookie minicamp. We like to take this time to listen to what teams are saying about players, right? If you listen to the media or follow things on social media, there's all these weird highlights and crazy stuff and opinions flying around, but a lot of that can be noise. I want to hear what the teams are saying, what the coaches, what the front office is saying about certain rookies and what they're doing with those rookies. That will tell you the truth about their plan. And there's one Lions rookie in particular that there's a lot of interesting movement behind. We'll get to that in just 1 second. But first, I'm Nick. That is Andrew. And this is Saturday Morning Inspection. All right, the Detroit Lions, of course, over the NFL draft, made a number of very interesting moves, but they picked offensive guard, offensive lineman Tate Rattlage out of the University of Georgia. Clearly a Dan Campbell guy, great fit for the Lions. But we're seeing an interesting approach with Rattlage working through rookie minicamp over the past few days. Let's pull up this report and then talk about what it really means on the other side. This is courtesy of Side Lion, or Lion, I couldn't even pronounce Lion right, report. As Holmes promised going in, and as observed by reporters on site during the first day, we're talking about minicamp, Rattlage got a lot of work at center during rookie minicamp. It's not a foreign spot to him, as he also cross-trained there at Georgia. The Lions are taking the opportunity during OTAs to survey their future options at center, and Rattlage's versatility was noted by Assistant General Manager Ray Agnew before rookie minicamp. You love the versatility in the player, Agnew said. He can play multiple positions inside and the interior. All right, the big takeaway here is that Rattlage got a lot of action. I mean, a lot of reps here at center during rookie minicamp. Now, it doesn't mean he's going to be starting center day one. No, right? The clearest path of least resistance for Rattlage being a year one starter is at the right guard position. But I think it's obvious. We know it's because of who's at the center right now. We're talking about Frank Ragnow, a Lion who's been through a lot of ups and downs, but he is getting close to 30. And if you look at the Detroit Lions structure and where he sits, his performance evaluation, it's clear the Lions are planning for a succession at the center position. In fact, let's go into a chart right here to explain exactly what we're talking about. Now, look, before we get too much into the details, Frank Ragnow is a special Detroit Lion, right? He's done a great job there. We're not saying that the Lions will move off of him, just cut him outright. They could restructure, they could figure out some things, but the reality is, and if you look at the data here, you can see his valuation, his cap hit minus his valuation, is a negative both this upcoming season and in 2026. The valuation courtesy of overthecap.com, and overthecap.com, they do a great job. They look at a player's production, his age, his position, the marketplace, and say, okay, how much is a player worth? And then you can subtract how much the Lions are paying him against the salary cap, and you see negative numbers both seasons. It gets worse in 2026. Now in the red, you see the cap savings the Lions incur if they release him, right? So in 2025, it's a little over $6 million, not really worth a whole lot, but in 2026, it flies well over $10 million. Based on the trajectory here, you can see this. As we go from 2025 to 2026, cap savings go up, cap hit minus valuation goes down. That usually means 9 times out of 10 that a team is preparing to release a player. I'm not saying that just because I want him released. I don't at all. I'm just saying this is what the numbers are saying. This is what the data is telling us. Now, of course, could Holmes and the Lions restructure his deal, and could they work something out? Absolutely. But based on the data, based on the numbers in front of us here, and of course, a lot of the other factors, the Lions are going to have to dole out a lot of dollars to some other key superstars. They're going to have to figure out who's going to be the center long term. And I know a lot of people looked at Rattlage and said, okay, he is the guard to replace Seitler. And that's probably true in the short term. But long term thinking, the Lions have to find their succession plan at center. Outside of left tackle, my personal opinion, I'm sure a lot of people agree, center is the second most, outside of left tackle, the most important position on the offensive line, communicating the calls, the structure of the defense, getting everyone to work together, being the leader up front. That's what Ragnow has been, and he's done a phenomenal job at it since day one. He's become a starter. But the reality is you have to plan for the future, and that's exactly what the Lions are doing here. And by giving Rattlage a lot of reps at center, now look, I understand it's rookie mini camp and all of that, but it is important to set this plan in place here if you're Detroit. I think the Detroit Lions have signaled that Rattlage is their future at this incredibly important position. All right, Miles, I'm curious what your thoughts are on all of this. But first, Lions fans, in the comment section below, if you don't already hate me for, I'm not saying Ragnow is going to be cut, but if you already hate me for saying he probably will get cut, I'll ask you this question right here. Who do you think is the most underrated Detroit line of all time during your fandom, right? There's been a lot of great ones. I think Ragnow's probably close to the top of the list. But let us know the most underrated Detroit line. I'll give you a name. He didn't spend his whole career with the Lions, but how about Dre Bly? I thought he did a lot of really nice things for the Lions for a few years, really exciting corner. But give us your most underrated Detroit Lion and put them in the comment section below. But Mize, over to you. What are your thoughts on everything the Lions are doing here with this rookie Tate Rattlage?
Yeah, Nick, and I think when you look at the possibilities, what people got to understand what we're saying here is when you look at the numbers, it's not like saying that Ragnow's a bad player that he needs to leave the team. It's talking about when you look at the numbers, do the dollars make sense? And
Yeah.
right now, unequivocally, they don't. And even into next year, it looks even worse. So you can't fault us for that, for saying when you look at the dollar, is not saying that he's not a great player, not that he wasn't a great player, not that he's going to, be a historic Detroit Lion. It's, do the dollars make sense? And right now, looking, he could have a heroic turnaround this year and be like the greatest player that we've ever seen. But as of right now, when you look at the numbers, they don't make sense. It really just doesn't add up to be a very smart to keep him. You're going to save a lot of money, and what he's valued at is negatively against the cap there. So I think that's really important to take into this calculation here. But when you look at Rattlage, so let's take Ragnow out of the picture now. Let's talk about Rattlage, what Rattlage brings to the table. I think this is a guy who's really, really interesting. He did a lot of great things at Georgia. I think he was a really talented player. I love how he cross-trained. They're already saying he can look like he can play center, and they're giving him some snaps there, and it seems like, they're thinking about his future there at the position. When I think Detroit Lions, and I think, could a guy be a Detroit Lion? What is the makeup of a Detroit Lion? Everyone knows lately, the Lions have been such a mainstay in the media lately. Dan Campbell, grit, determination, biting kneecaps. That's the things that come to mind when you think Detroit Lions over the last couple of years, and with this new Dan Campbell led team. What comes to mind are those type of things, and Tate Rattlage definitely is a guy that fits that bill. And if you want to ask anyone other than me, ask his former teammate, then also Detroit Lion, Dominic Lovett, the rookie from Georgia, came out and said this. This is what he said about Rattlage. He says, Tate's the type of guy that's going to die for the quarterback. I love those words. I like when someone comes out and says that, because, talking about his teammate here, talking about another fellow Georgia player, and just, this is the kind of guy, is the grit, determination. He leaves it all out on the field. He's willing to go to war and die for that quarterback. I really like that. When I heard that, it's a small sentence, really something a throwaway comment, but it struck me as Tate Rattlage seems like a guy that fits the persona of the Detroit Lions and the persona of this offensive line, because there's a lot of grittiness, there's a lot of nastiness on the Detroit Lions offensive line. I think there's, like, when you think of this offensive line that's been one of the best in the NFL for the last few years, I think there's got to be a certain kind of player that comes in and replaces anyone who is going to leave that, especially a guy like Frank Ragnow. When you hear what people think about Tate Rattlage early on, and you think his teammates saying this is the kind of guy that's going to go out there and die for the quarterback, I love that. I think he brings a lot of those attributes to the table that the Detroit Lions are looking for. So overall, I think this could be good. I think we have to wait and see, but dollars don't make sense right now for Ragnow. Rattlage could be the future. We got to wait and see. It's very early on, but early signs indicate that there's something to watch here in Tate Rattlage in Detroit.
Yeah, and you have to have this succession plan. I think that's very important, right? It's at any position, but especially the key positions. Everyone always focuses on quarterback, and rightly so. But a lot of these other key positions, center being one of them, middle linebacker, where it's very cerebral, where you need a veteran who can direct other people. You need to make sure you have a guy that's well trained, or at least have evaluated potential opportunities to see if they could be that guy. Because you don't want to be in a situation, especially you Lions fans, right? You're in the middle of a title window right now. You've got Ragnow. Let's say he becomes a salary cap casualty next season. The way the data is trending, it might be, because they got to pay a lot of other people. And now you got to throw a brand new center in there and hope it works out as you're trying to win a title, right? That's not a situation you want to be in. You want to think ahead of time. And I look at a guy like Rattlage again, who played at the University of Georgia, a physical, tough dude. All the scouting reports say to a man, hey, he's a mauler, he's a beast. I look at a guy who has that. If you have that mentality, if you have I'm going to be a mauler, and you look at how he plays and the critiques against him are is that well his technique isn't the best. To me, if you're going to be a good football player without technique, it doesn't matter if you're a mauler. You're also using your intelligence, right? Because people look at him and say, well, his pad level's too high. Is certain things aren't great. His footwork and foot speed may not absolutely be the best. Well, to me, that means he understands angles. He understands body position. He understands the play design, knows how to put his body in a position to protect the running back or the quarterback, running back to open a hole, quarterback and pass protection, and then turn on the nastiness and put people in the dirt, right? As a former collegiate offensive lineman myself way back in the day, I looked at that as a really key factor with good offensive linemen, right? Just because a guy's like, he has a mentality of being like a bully or just kind of a physical presence, that doesn't mean he's not a really smart guy. I think a lot of those guys who play that way are generally, at least a lot of my teammates were the smarter guys in terms of football IQ. Because if you don't have the great athletic skill set, you have to use smarts in place of that. And I think that's what Rattlage did at Georgia. I think it's an underrated aspect of his game. People look at it, the hair and all this, and just his mentality and how he carries himself, and they say, oh, he's just a meathead idiot who's just going to throw his body in there like an old school like 1980s movie or something like that. He's actually a very sharp guy when it comes to football intelligence, and I think that's why the Lions are giving him and will continue to give him a lot of opportunities at the center position. Again, they have to figure out the succession plan, or they're going to have to sacrifice somebody else if they decide to extend Ragnow long term. Based on the way the dollars are structured right this second in time, it looks like Ragnow will be the sacrifice next offseason, as I'll put money somewhere else. And Rattlage could be the long-term answer for the Lions at that center position. And this is why when a lot of people evaluated the draft, I'm like, what are the Lions doing? This feels a little bit of a reach. Now we're seeing why, right? When you get into the data and look at the situations, teams that are focused on winning the draft are usually losing teams. Teams that are focused on winning the following season are usually decent teams. Teams that are focused on winning for the next 5 to 10 years are the championship teams. The Lions with Holmes have done a great job focusing on the future, and that's exactly what they did drafting Rattlage, and that's exactly what they're doing with how they're treating him. And it's one of the many reasons why the Lions will be contenders, not just this season, but for many seasons to come.